Good afternoon. How are you? Well, I've been out walking and it's raining. So I'm standing under a tree. So this is sort of like a hybrid of stand and talk or walk and talk. Temperature's 70. That's really nice. The humidity's like 40. It's very comfortable. And it's an Irish rain. It's not a driven rain, as you can tell. So I have a couple of observations. They're not all focused on Trump. And I thought I should give you fair warning in case that's the only thing you want to hear from me. But I think I have a couple of things that are interesting that play into politics and government and how we deal and fail to deal with the most important stuff. So, for example, the criminal justice system. That's certainly a Trump topic, but it goes beyond that. And there are so many examples of the different rules that apply to different people, the different levels. And the joke that is no man is above the law is manifest and has been for some time. But there is a current example of that. Now, but first let me tell you what I think the standard should be for the criminal justice system as a bare minimum. And that is, isn't the system fatally defective if it can convict an innocent person? Meaning an innocent person shouldn't be prosecuted in the first place. But when he or she is, and found guilty, though still innocent, isn't that an example of a failure of the system? So how do we feel about that? Obviously, I have a strong feeling about it. Now, how do you feel about the execution of an innocent person? Now, you may think that this is an unfortunate and impossible hypothetical, but it's not. There is a fellow named Marcellus Williams. He's 55 years old. He was convicted of a murder, but his prosecutor afterwards saw evidence and believes he's innocent, and he does not want him to be executed. And you may ask, when is the execution scheduled for? It's too moist for me. And the answer is it's scheduled for tomorrow. So they want to execute him tomorrow. Is that going to happen? It is still possible. The prosecutors in the case made a motion to stay the execution and to send the case back to the trial court to consider the evidence that they've been presenting. So is that going to happen? I don't know. As of the time I'm talking to you in the late afternoon, it may have been decided, but maybe not. So what's another issue that I think we care about? And it would be interesting to say take a poll on this question. But there's a lot of discussion of what are the values of polls. And since I was young and interested in politics to this day, I've always used polls in this way. If I can find enough details, meaning the size of the sample, how they conducted it, and so forth, overcame things like people don't pick up their phones, don't come to the door of their house. If they've dealt with those things over the years, then you have a sense that at the time they take this statistical snapshot. Depending on how they ask the question, you have some bit of information. Now, the other thing I've always looked at is the vectors. That is to say, what is the direction of the numbers? So, for example, in Kamala's case, it's been going toward her. It hasn't gone by leaps and jumps, but it has steadily moved forward. So part of us would like to say that motion should continue, right? But there's no reason why that is the case. The poll is a snapshot, and the error is one that we share, that we use all the time, which is our inductive reasoning. So 7 times this has happened, so shouldn't it happen the 8th? The polls continue to go up, shouldn't they continue to go up? In other words, we look at the slope of a line, assuming that you're measuring something in a line as opposed to an arc or any number of things. So you want to believe that the next one is going to follow that. But it doesn't have to. Now, Nassim Taleb wrote a book years ago called the Black Swan. Excuse me. I almost defeated the whole proposition of the book. But it shows, perhaps, in my example, even though I knew what I was going to say, how I am caught in the view that for most of my life, the only swans I ever saw were white. But in Australia and New Zealand, there are black swans. So if you went along saying, in the instances in my life when I've looked at swans from age X to age Y, they've always been white. And then you have a shock. They're black. Now, that may not sound like that's a useful analysis because it seems like a discrete element. But there are things that you would, well, since we have so many turkeys running for office in the Republican Party, let's talk about turkeys. A turkey, say for 1,000 days, is fed and believes the people love him. I don't know what the sense is, the consciousness, the sentience of a turkey is. We have several that are not so bright on our property. And so it goes along and it's fine. And then all of a sudden on one day, it's turkey dinner. So inductive reasoning didn't help us in that situation. We say, well, what are you talking about? Turkeys, you know what they're doing, and stuff like that. Okay. Take how much you earned over a period of lifetime, and are you able inductively to figure out what's going to happen next? What about inflation? What about rates? What about elections? What is happening today? What is happening tomorrow? So what is the story then that we're talking about? What we're saying is Kamala has substituted Trump in terms of having motion going forward that favors her election. That's very good. So we would like to believe it will continue, but it may not. So what is the remedy for dealing with the fact that a black swan could arrive someday, that the turkey could be killed, that the number for your your weight, that's a terrible choice, right? So what is the remedy to that? The remedy is to do what we're doing. That is, knock on a door if you can, write a letter for someone, vote yourself early, get a friend to do so, contribute $5 or $10 or more if you can. Go to a meeting and just inform yourself, because knowing what's going on, I think, is helpful. And then thereby, we can perhaps have those numbers in that poll go day by day in the direction we prefer. But we always have to keep in mind something can happen that can throw that poll off. Now, there are lots of discussions about what polling means and doesn't mean. It is useful. It does tell us things, but we have to know the reach of it. Now, I prefer 538, which is a combination of the number of representatives and so forth in our government on both sides of the hill. And they use a lot of techniques, and they look at other polling done by others, and they have a running poll every day that shows what they think the chances are. As we've learned, it's not infallible, but it's helpful. And you might think of it as a prod to do what we need to do to win this election. I did hear some talk about the enemies list, which was featured as I went over it yesterday in the New York Times. And I thought the significant thing about it was that people didn't act and knew about it. By writing notes to the president say, you shouldn't do that, this is what you should do right, it seems to me that when he does wrong after you know that, your responsibility is to turn him in, have him stop, seek redress against his misconduct, constitutional and in criminal law. The commentators, however, are saying like it's a normalized thing. Oh, the public will know about it and it will matter in terms of the election. There's a notion called misprision of felony. And misprision of felony means that you know of a crime and you do nothing about it. So You know of a crime, you do nothing about it, and often you write a book about it after the fact, and you make money, and you still didn't save anybody from anything because you didn't do anything at the time that it mattered. This is America, though. There was a woman in New York who was apparently attacked, and nobody in the houses came out to help her, and she was ultimately killed. And there are stories saying it's not as simple as that, and it was more complicated. But I've been on subways in New York when something was happening and everybody else hunkers down, and it's a rare person that gets up and either gets a cop or tells the person to stop or whatever, because there's a risk involved, plainly. So going back to the White House, these people felt the risk to their career. They just got to hang on here. They got to have that statement on their resume, and so they can go outside and make fortunes and perhaps run for office themselves and so forth. That is wrong. That's wrong as a template for public service. It should be obvious. And it's obvious because you see what happens. This man, Trump, has been allowed to commit all manner of crimes and nobody has done anything about it. That's a shame and a disgrace, but that's America. Makes me think my first oratorical speech is kicking around in my head, and as I'm from New York, the first oratorical speech I gave, I was in the 8th grade in grammar school, and it starts with, "Some evening when you are in New York, walk up Broadway from Times Square. To an outsider, a visitor, it's a special place. Blinking red neons blind your eyes. Cab drivers run from hotel to hotel, and men thrust tips into the hands of waiting doormen. To many overseas and here, this is America." Okay, material, lots of lies, lots of flashes, and so forth. Do we lose sight of what is the best about life? Like standing under a tree, there's no lightning, by the way, but it's not smart, I concede that, so that I can do a walk and talk while not walking, but standing outside. And what we have to do is we have to keep tabs on our value system and apply it. We are in the darkest period, I think, of my life, even looking back at Nixon doing what he did, both Bushes being involved in wars. They should have, one was the Iran-Contra, the other was Iraq. Reagan, of course, was part of the same thing that Bush was. We have had a tragedy of leaders doing things that violate the Constitution and violate the law, and we have to watch that. I have kicking around in my mind, and this is kind of an unusual presentation. It may be because I'm standing outside trying to avoid the rain. But the one of them is the Mark Robinson thing. This sort of fits my analysis of you have no standards and you have no values. And I'm not talking, we already know Robinson's thing. The Republican Party last week, knowing what they know about him, that is that he's a man who favors slavery, dissed Martin Luther King, and admits he's a Nazi. Okay, so that's him. So I don't vote for him. But how does a Republican Party look at itself in the mirror and endorse a man like that for office? And what message should that send to us? Is that just unusual? Is that okay? Does anything go in politics? Is there like a suspension? You wonder why they have these movies in which they say, one day a year, you can commit any crime in the world and people lock themselves in and people go out and do the sport of committing crimes against each other. Killings and mayhem and so forth. Okay, what do we have here? Rampaging corruption. Extensive violation of the laws. Very different standards for the people who are in government and connected as compared to you and me. And this is what we have to be fighting in this campaign. These elements that break down our society in ways that may force it to limp along. We have to call these things out for what they are, and that includes Mark Robinson. Yes, maybe he's going to help us in North Carolina, because the bottom of the ticket will pull the top of the ticket, which is Trump, which actually encouraged this guy and encouraged some of the things that he said. This is a pretty sad time in America when we have these kinds of people doing these kinds of things. So for the Republican Party, Mark Robinson is not a bridge too far. His outrageous conduct is not so bad. That 200 people, we believe, have been executed who are innocent. Doesn't that bother us at all? Isn't that like a crazy warning sign the system isn't working? And so we pretend to say that these things as they go on, whether it be how we run a campaign or how we sort out innocence and conviction and how we present it and how we go forward with it. How do we do that? And there's one really troubling, and we see these things from afar, and we could say, well, we don't have anything to do with it. You're familiar with in Darfur that there's the Rapid Support Forces, that's their name. And the Rapid Support Forces are forcing some Africans out of the nation into Chad. So from Sudan to Chad. And how are they doing this? They are literally raping the women, all ages, and the men. And there's enormous famine there. And I don't know all who are listening well enough to know how comfortable you would be. But in order to defend themselves, particularly the women, they have sewn themselves to protect themselves from the rape. Now, this does not deter the rapists, the government, who is attacking these people. And the children that are dying because they don't have food, when we think and look at people going from hotel to hotel or restaurant to restaurant, thrusting tips into the hands of smiling doormen, that is our America too. And I would bet that most of us who are on this think, well, that's not us and we wouldn't do that. And I believe that that's true. But where do these other people come from, and how as a society do they get away with it? Now, you might say, so what do we have to do with Darfur? Well, it's because we're saying things kindly about their government even as this is going on. And I know maybe I sound like a West Wing episode saying this, but if the government isn't going to do the right things in these situations that are so obvious, what is our government, and what are we as silent observers of it? Now, we're not talking about any of these things. Has anybody mentioned in the presidential campaign that we kill the innocent? No. Has anybody talked about how a poll really works and what we should do and how we should use it, maybe which ones we should use? No. Do our hosts do anything except to normalize the most outrageous conduct? No. Yet we are on the move. We are making a difference in our elections. We are redefining what's going on. And to take on, again, the inductive reasoning question, is what happened that we went from an inductive reasoning pattern that we thought was going to lead to failure and had no chance of improving. And what happened? What happened was Kamala and Tim came together, that the nation was awakened to act. Again, it's we the people, and this is our nation, and we are the ones that have to make this right. Whether it be something happening in a far land or our courtrooms or in our competitions or in the White House with a crooked president. We have to deal with these things because it affects all of us. We are not separate, we are joined together. So, I can't say I'm going to turn among my cathedral of trees, although you can see I'm right in the trees. And I hope tomorrow I'll be out. But I must say it's pretty pleasant. And I would have continued to walk outside, but I think the phone would only take so much water before it would fail us. So these are not easy times, and we are learning things. And I think as a result, we're going to change America for the better. But in the meantime, we have people out there who are normalized by journalists, who are tolerated and explained and diminished in terms of how offensive what they're doing is. I heard people today say, the fact that Trump would fix criminal cases and so forth, well, that's not good. But, well, it's worse than not good. It's obstructing justice. It's interfering in a system that's supposed to be impartial, that's supposed to be looking for the truth of a thing. So I now sign off. I hope you enjoyed my meandering thoughts. And it actually, some of the rain is getting through this tree, so I'm going to move on. Take care. Bye-bye.